Okay, welcome everyone who's here with us live. We have a nice crowd of educators. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm thankful to see you and can't wait for this wonderful discussion today about the inquiry mindset questions additions. Today we're going to be talking about chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we're actually going to be covering a lot again. We're jamming a big book in a little time, but that's okay because we can keep ongoing conversations in the community as well. But each of these chapters has their own questioning routine. And so Penny's going to walk us through those questioning routines. And then we're going to have a discussion and conversation about questioning in your classrooms. We have educators here that work with students, and we have educators here that work with teachers. And I have experience doing both. And so don't shy away from asking your questions, participating in the chat, all of that. We're all educators of one sort or another. And so Penny, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you get us started. Welcome.
First of all, thank you everybody, because I know it's a bit late for some of you. It's late for me, and it's 7:30 in Spain, and for me that's late, so I really appreciate that. Especially if you're working, if it's a working day like me, so thank you. Today is going to be very practical. I've already told Sybil before that I'm just going to keep it like straight to the point, so then we can discuss. The question routines we are going to deal with are kind of, they like complement each other. We go from the bases to the more difficult ones. So we are going to see that they are like a jigsaw puzzle, and we can use some of them together. We start with the question continuum, which is the first one from the book. Sybil already unpacked it, so you have read in the community what she has written, but I'm just going to give you my ideas, okay? So for me, it's like a starting point for children when you use question routines. And from my point of view, as I work with visible thinking routines, I see it as a seeing wonder. I compare it to seeing wonder when I use it in my classes. Because I do PYP1 and they are really little. And then I move to the question triangle routine, which is one we will delve into later for my wonder word. So you can also give me your thoughts about it later, because that's my point of view. Then relating to what the book says, you know, it's good for introduction. This routine is perfect because it can be redone, it can be revisited, and it can be altered. You know, it's based on a line in which you put post-it notes with the questions. The process is very easy once the students are trained, and it makes a difference because it really teaches the students the difference between closed and open questions very clearly, very visual, and very easily for them. And I've written here page 89, because in page 89, they mention the fishbowl strategy for a student organization. And for me, that strategy is really good. Students are separated into a small inner group and large outer group. And the outside group is invited to observe and listen to the conversation, and the inner group is the one that takes notes and documents the thinking. So if you have students with different levels and different needs, that strategy can help you introduce the question continuum in your classes. And then once everybody gets used to it, they can work. Then I'm going to move really fast to the 2.0 question continuum. You know, the new version, the fresh version. Because for me, that's the one I use. Students work in small groups because they feel more comfortable, they feel safe. You know that for me, my students' well-being is the priority. So I want them to feel comfortable, feel safe. And it's also better for us as teachers for observing the groups, observing the dynamics, observing how they make questions, how they develop that question culture. And in this one, students tend to participate more. They tend to join in more because it's smaller and they feel more confident than in a big group. That's why I wrote down the fishbowl strategy as well, because for me, it also helps the students that don't have that confidence that the other ones have. And then we move to page 117. I've been doing my homework. And we move to one of the experiences that Trevor has portrayed in this book, which is one I really liked. And it's one from Wendy Wilson in Lincoln Fundamental Elementary School. And Wendy says that kids are great collaborators when teachers can facilitate a great routine. That's something we were talking about last week, that if we teachers feel confident with what we are doing, students will do well. So students will collaborate better if students have a mastery of the routine. And in that page, you can see a picture of the question continuum with all the post-it notes. And also, she says, inquired teaching is so much fun for me to teach because students are enjoying learning too. Their confidence and growth were on full display. So this is when you know that a routine, either a visible question routine, a question routine, anything in routine is successful. When you see your students having fun and being confident and growing and learning. So this basically is my summary for question continuum, because as Sybil did one, I was like keeping it to, to the bullet points. I just throw the bullet points on you and then we can discuss. But for me, I will just, take as keywords, introduction, can be altered. It's a process, easy process. It makes a difference. The fishbowl strategy and the 2.0, the working in small groups. I would take those intakes. For me, this is like a really small introduction. I've used it, but I've used it as a addition to my provocations for learning. I haven't used it as a consistent routine in my classes because you need to have a long line with lots of post-its. You need to keep it on your board. And for me, it wasn't really practical. So I needed something else. As everybody, I have my favorites. Here comes one of my favorites, the question triangle. I cannot hear you, Sybil.
Sorry, I was muted. Can I
Okay.
interrupt real quick? Do we want to
Yeah.
pause there and just discuss the question continuum a little bit for a few minutes? No worries. And then we can go on to the next one. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay.
Let's
So
do
I'm
it
not sure also if everyone got to see the post in the group. But basically it's a routine where kids are putting their questions along a continuum, right? That's why it's called a continuum, a question continuum routine. And it's just helping kids see what kinds of questions other people are asking, right? It's helping them see where their questions fit on the continuum of opened to closed, how we can reframe questions to get different kinds of responses, to get different kinds of thinking, right? So like Penny said, it's a real foundational a great starting point to just start asking questions with your kiddos. And I love, Penny, what you said about small groups, because any of these question routines can also be done in small groups. Now, sometimes that's more challenging because kids don't know how to do it independently, right? But you could do it whole group and then small group too to get some more practice as well. And if you're fortunate enough to have a teaching assistant or help in the classroom at certain times of the day, that's a great time to do small groups too. So let's chat for just 5 minutes or so about this routine. Has anybody, did Saba, I think you shared in the group, yeah?
Yes, I've been trying it this week in class, and since I'm doing prep 2, that is 5 to 6 year old. So we started with a routine, and I realized that they need to have some kind of prompts to come up with the questions. So then I ended up adding those small flashcards which said what why. And I actually took it from the question pencil routine. So now I had a very the children had a lot of fun. Actually, I was very happy about that they did have a lot of fun, and the prompts really helped them to think and come up with questions. Most of the questions were closed ended, but I think this was the first time. I think they'll get better with the questioning. But now I don't know if I should call it the question continuum or should I call it the pencil routine, because I actually it ended up looking like a pencil routine. So I don't know. I was very confused. I shall put up the pictures today, tomorrow, or by today. But I enjoyed it, but I was quite confused that am I doing the question continuum or am I doing the question pencil routine?
Penny, what are your thoughts on that? My thoughts are that it doesn't matter, number one.
was going
You
to
were
say the
asking,
same.
your kids were asking questions, and that is at the heart of it, right? And you were trying out strategies. And so that reflection is number one key, most important. My response, and we'll hear what Penny's response to that is what is your purpose? What are you hoping after doing that lesson? And now that it happened the way it happened, what are you hoping the kids are walking away with? The idea of understanding closed and open, the understanding of there's different kinds of questions, why, how, right? And maybe even having a reflection with them of, what kinds of questions did we ask and what kind, and then the open closed is different than the why, how, the different kinds of questions. So that's kind of my thinking. What do you think, Penny?
I think that it really doesn't matter, as you said, because they are all question routines and they promote curiosity. And for me, for example, I didn't start with the question continuum. I start with the question pencil. And then I use the question continuum in my provocation activities together with Seeing Wonder. Because my children were so small that they needed something to support. They needed a background. And then after we finish any questioning session with the question pencil, we always sit down on the floor in front of the pencil and we do like a reflection about the questions we have, if they can be answered in the class, if they can be taken further. But I don't really have a question continuum as a standalone, as something independent. I think we will see it in the question sort routine and in the question quadrant, that they are part of a jigsaw puzzle. They go together. So I think that when you use the question pencil, you're also using the question continuum. So I think, yeah, I agree.
Anyone else want to chime in about what Saba was asking or about your own experience with this?
Sure. I'll jump in. So my kids are bigger. They're grade 5. And the question pencil is what I use. It's the only thing that sparks any kind of creation of questions at all because of the prompts. And I would say, Saba, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I would say that to me personally, all of the strategies I've noticed in this book is a form of, it's kind of like is a continuum of sorts. The pencil is a continuum, because if you notice, the prompts start from the easiest ones. The kids will always be why, can, what. And as it gets further to the lead of the pencil, the writing part of the pencil, the questions now become ungoogleable questions that you cannot Google, that you have to do. Maybe you have to do person-to-person interviews, or you have to find a way to maybe observations or something like that. So the level of the questions get more difficult, more challenging, becomes more open-ended as you use it. I just think that the pencil acts as just presents us with prompts, and then you can, of course, use them interchangeably with the continuum, especially because you're trying to build the questioning skills within the students. And it's easier. It's much easier for you. It's easier for the students, and they feel less stressed.
Love that. Thank you, Andrea. Great.
Yeah, I love it too. I agree completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially about the unbookable questions. I love that. When you get those, it's the best time.
Yes. And it takes time, like we're gonna see growth, right? If this is like the beginning, no matter if you started with the pencil or the continuum routine, try to take some notes, try to write down what the kids are saying because their questions will grow fast, right? The more you do any and all of these routines, even the hybrid, we'll just call yours, Saba, the hybrid routine.
What I do with the pencil, what Andrea said about the different parts of the pencil till you arrive to the writing part, is that if you have seen the photo I've posted today, in my pencil there's empty rectangles because my kids don't use those question words. But if at some point they are able to add a new question word, we write it. That's why we have the empty spaces. So they only add question words when they are ready to stop asking why, and can all the time.
So Penny,
Yeah, so
I did see your display with I think I saw it on Instagram before I saw it on school.
yeah, maybe,
And
yeah.
and I was like, yes, of course you would only use the first three or so because of the age of your students. And I was thinking, how is she going to get them to the other level? And I'm like, okay, she's gonna figure something out. She's gonna find a way to get them
No,
into
yeah.
asking.
They do
But the
it
thing,
themselves.
no,
Yeah.
I mean, how are you gonna introduce those bigger levels in terms of the might, the possibilities? And I'm thinking in my head, when I was looking at your display, I was thinking it's gonna be something like when you're doing a story, or like you do like a what should I say, like you're telling a fairy tale and you cut it in the middle, or you stop it halfway and you go, what do you think is gonna happen? That type of thing. And then they now start to have their imagination. And that's when you get the possibility question and then go, okay, I think this is going to happen. So then they can start building their questions based off what they think is good. So this was my head. But when I saw
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
I was like
We
thinking,
have,
let's
it's
know how I
completely,
would do it for younger kids, because getting older kids to ask a question is like pulling teeth. So I can imagine. Um, I can imagine. So I was so happy with when Trevor came out with this book. I was like, oh my God, this is like a manna from heaven, because now we have a strategy to get kids to ask questions. Now my students ask questions. They ask questions, so yeah. Anyway, that was just my
Awesome.
brainstorming about when I saw your picture.
we have now the what if. Instead of might, they said what if, instead of what will happen, because will sometimes is too difficult. They are not native. What if? So for me, what if is enough. I'm so happy.
What
I write
if is
it down.
powerful for adults too. What if, right? Priscilla, did you have a question or?
Yes, it is.
Well, I wanted to share that I was thinking a lot about the provocations because, as I said the last time, I work with teachers, right? So to have, I was reading in the book, to have like these good questions being developed within time with the kids, you need to have good provocations to generate and spark that curiosity and that desire to make this type of questions that we want. So what I did with my teachers is I found a video. So I was thinking like a provocation for teachers to want to do provocation. That was kind of like a thing so I found this movie, a part of a movie where the teacher is like quite a different teacher and he does different things. I will tell you the name. It's in Spanish. It's called Radical. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's I will send the link anyway. So the idea is that the teachers also think about that part, and then we did a visible thinking routine, one that I had from a workshop that Penelope had shared way back. So I was trying to connect everything, like the book, this workshop, this and that. So I'm there. I'm trying that with the teachers. I'm gonna do the continuous later because first I did the pencil question thinking routine. And now tomorrow I'm going to do it with a group of students to see the difference, of course, and try it with the students, which is the best part. But I'm wondering, like, the indicators, like, because it also talks about having these indicators so the kids understand the difference between closed and open questions. Like, how would you, like, I don't know if you have experience doing that part before going to the continuous. Like, what advice do you have? Tomorrow I have that. I want to do that with third graders. So I don't know, like, how can it work?
I can chime in. One thing, when I taught early childhood most of my career, and then at the end of my time in the classroom, after I was instructional coaching for a while and went back to the classroom, I was teaching 5th and 6th grade. And so what I found with them, with this question of like, what are the indicators? For me, finding exemplars, good, what does good look like? Was really powerful. So you could do like an open-ended sort as your provocation, and you just have a whole bunch of questions, and you can give them a definition of open and closed if you want, or you don't have to. Like, people like to do different levels of inquiry, right? But let them sort questions. And you could
Yeah.
also have good questions, right? Like powerful open questions, good closed questions, but you could also have some that just don't lead anywhere. They just, we don't want kids to think that closed questions are bad questions. We want them to think that they're a different level of question. They get a different response. They serve a different purpose, right? And so third graders are able to do that kind of work. So that's one thing that came to my head as a provocation idea. And then you go do the routine. And so they've learned what open and closed means somewhat through the provocation. And then during the routine, you're doing the sorting on the continuum, if that's the one you want to do, and furthering that discussion. And then you can bring in some of those from the provocation too, if they're on sticky notes, or the kids could write them on sticky notes. You can add those, so you can have student ones on the board, and you can have some from your sort on the board. That's one idea for you. Does anyone else have a response to that or an idea?
I basically let them brainstorm, and if the questions are closed, I don't tell them. I just repeat the question and I say, do you think you can answer it now? Do you think you have the knowledge in your mind? And when they realize they can answer the question, they realize that's a closed question. Because, in my case, it's the opposite of Andrea. My children, once they start asking, they don't stop. You know how 6-year-olds are. They ask about everything. Today we were Googling what a dead moth was, because I was wearing a necklace with a dead moth, and they wanted to know if that was real. So we ended up, instead of talking about jobs, talking about moths and butterflies. But the thing is that I don't tell them, as I said the other day, there are no bad questions. There are only open questions and closed questions, more difficult, easier ones. So I just put everything, and then we sort them out depending on what they think. If they think they need a friend, and then it will be a closed question. If they think they had the answer and they didn't know, because they were just vomiting questions. And the other ones that are more difficult for them, we will put them in the open one. And then we will decide if they were difficult open questions or so-so, as we say, open questions.
Yeah, and then together co-create those indicators, right?
Mm.
Okay, so what do all these open questions have in common? They don't have an answer in my head. They are not completely Googleable. Right? What do these have in common? So then you can co-create those indicators, get those up on the wall, right? And then they're going to use that the next time you go do some kind of routine. Amazing. Okay, Penny, let's move on to the next questioning routine.
The next question routine is one of my favorite ones. I have my favorites, and I have ones I don't like. I'm not going to say which ones, but the question triangle, okay? The question triangle, I've chosen it to be my new wonder wall, as you've seen in the photos. I've adapted it, and I think it's very useful and very structured and very visual, and students will come up with a very clear definition of closed question, middle questions, and open questions, because it's visual. It's a triangle. So as I said the other day, small like a mouse, medium like a cat, and big as an elephant. Then if we refer to the book, the idea I get, the big idea, the central idea I get about this question triangle routine is that it's vital for inquiry planning. It's a vital routine. It's better to use it when students are familiar with number one, with the question continuum, which is something that, you know, Saba and us were discussing, that all routines can be used at the same time. So in the book, it says that it's better to use it once the students are familiar with number one, with the other routine, but also with any other question routine, or just with making questions. In page 123, you have the diagram, and you have like a straight definition saying that the question triangle routine is different from the question continuum because the structure makes students organize their questions into three categories. The three categories we've mentioned, you know, closed questions, more open questions, and most open questions. For my students, that doesn't make any sense. So I would say big, medium, and small. And that's it. And if you lower it even more, as I said, mouse, cat, and elephant. And they are happy with that. With 6th graders, 5th graders, 5th graders, I don't know, maybe middle and would be an appropriate one. I don't know. But for me, this was too difficult, so I had to translate it. And you have to use the vocabulary that makes most sense for your learners, either in the questioning, as we were talking about question words before, either in the structure of the questions or in the structure of the triangle. Then something very striking about this routine is that once the students become familiar with it, it can become even more visual because it can be transformed into an arrow instead of a triangle. That's in page 125. And you have the closed questions at the end of the arrow, the more open questions in the middle, and in the tip of the arrow, the most open questions. So suddenly the question triangle transforms into an arrow, and the arrow is the direction of our inquiry, because we want our inquiry to go directed to open questions and Googleable questions. In my class, that's not going to happen. I'm sorry. We have a triangle. Okay, we cannot go further than that. Right now, we are happy with a triangle. But maybe next year in second, when they are 7, 8, we can just put the triangle in an arrow mode and we can do something. But right now, I'm limited to the triangle. And something very, very interesting as well is that here you can use like the thinking hat system. You know, the thinking hats? To make students, again, co-designers of this arrow, co-designers of this questioning. You can say that they have to put on their question hats or the designer hat, and they co-design inquire based on what they notice in the question triangle. So you see them like in an assembly mode, like we said before, we reflect together, we talk, and we plan inquiry with the help of the question triangle. The question triangle directs our inquiry. And that's related to the famous sketch note of the astronaut. I don't know if you know Trevor's sketch note that says Learner Agency is out of this world, that has a little cute astronaut on it. Because the inquiry cycle can be connected to the question triangle, which can be connected to the phases of inquiry, like in Kath Murdoch's, you know, inquiry circle. So that makes you plan with an end in mind. It's true that it can change all your planning again, but we were saying that we are risk takers. So we are using question routines because we don't mind that our planning is changed. What else? We always have to justify why. We always have to justify why we are doing something. We always have to explain why a question matters. We always have to explain, for example, why we turn the triangle into an arrow. Or we have to try and make students be able to explain it, pull an explanation out of them, which can be, painful, long, and tiring. But I believe that we can do it. How do we do it? We know the direction of the inquiry and we identify the strengths and the weaknesses of that inquiry and where the learning can be a challenge. And taking that into account, as teachers, as Sybil said before, we plan what we need to know first. We have like a bank of knowledge. Which questions will help us get started if students don't start asking? How can we sneak in some questions, maybe making them think they are making the questions, but we are leaving them? And also which questions are easy and they can spark the curiosity and lead us to ungoogable questions, from googable questions to ungoogable ones. And always, always, always justify. Then, of course, taking into account all the teachers' experiences Trevor covers in this routine, we see that most of the teachers use the question triangle as Wonderwall. And that it's great. We no longer have those wonder walls that were posits and boring and look like a wall. I had one in my class for 3 years. I don't have it anymore, and I love my triangle. And we can also compare the triangle also to a river or to the sea. If you remember the learning river we were talking about in the other session, you can have shallow questions like that you can see from a boat, medium questions, maybe you have to go fishing a little bit, and deep questions, you have to go scuba diving. So you can always use metaphors for any age group, and that's why I like this routine. And also it can make a very big difference when starting the inquiry, because it can make them feel more connected to it, or that's the feeling I get. And I think that's my summary of this one. This was longer because, I'm a little bit more passionate. Yeah, this is it.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to do a lot of things here and I'm not getting them all right. So I love what you said about calling them big or small. On page here, they call them, can you read that?
Novice, yeah, novice high, novice middle, and novice low, yeah.
Right, so whatever you want to name them, and you can even have small groups name them and then vote
Yeah,
on
that's page 152, yeah.
what we should call them. That's 156, page 156.
Yeah.
Has anyone tried out the triangle questioning routine yet? Not yet? Okay. So we'll talk more about that one in the community this week. But I love, Penny, that you're using that. That's your Wonderwall now. Like, that's awesome. Just the visualness of that is so strong and good. Like that makes so much sense. That's an amazing thing to say. Fatima says, can we have a question pencil on a Wonderwall?
There's no straight definition of a Wonderwall, and you can have anything on your Wonderwall. In fact, in my class, as you have seen, I have the question pencil and I have the triangle. And in some units of inquiry, we use the pencil. In other units, we use the triangle. In other units, we don't use anything, and we just make questions in our agency area. We have an agency area. So anything can be a Wonderwall. I think question routines are just there for making students be curious and wake up. They are flexible. It's not something you have to use for a purpose. You can use them for everything. So
I agree, and there's no right or wrong to any of this, right? Trevor is giving us kind of a continuum of like foundational, a little bit higher level now that they know this, now that they know this. But that does not mean that any of these can't be used really in any order or any combination or things like that, right? We're getting our kids to be curious and ask questions and that culture. And then as you do these things, like just let that go and feel free to just try it. And then as you do these things over time, you're like, oh, I should have done that one first. My kids really responded to that. They needed that extra level of scaffolding. Next year, I'll, do that. Or right now, tomorrow, I'm going to do that. Plenty of times, even with adults, with teachers, it's like, okay, you model. Like yesterday we did this and I noticed that there was this misconception, or we weren't understanding this. And so today we're going to try it this way. That's so powerful for kiddos and adults alike to realize that there's not a right or wrong. We're being curious, we're asking questions. Maybe the provocations didn't bring as much out as you hoped. So yesterday it was kind of hard to ask questions with those provocations. I noticed, at this table, we ended up asking all closed questions. Today I've got X, Y, and Z out. Let's see if we can get some more on this part of the triangle and get some more open-ended, even, the highest level or whatever your language is. So amazing.
yeah, we have good and bad teaching days. So we need
Oh
to
my
have
gosh, yes,
lots
we do.
of techniques and lots of resources.
You've got to
let
give
me know
yourself grace
the
and just
rules,
keep
how they
going.
are,
But I'm the
depending
kind
on
of
how
person,
good
I
we
just
are.
name it. I'm like, it didn't work for me. And honestly, I get a lot of feedback from students over the years and adults. I feel comfortable with you, or I learned because you modeled your mistakes. You modeled that, you didn't get it right the first time, or every group of students is so different. Last year it went beautifully. This year, oh my gosh, these kiddos didn't ask a single open-ended question, right?
But they will end up asking if you're
Yep, they
consistent.
will.
That's
They
the good
will.
thing.
Okay, Penny, I'm going to pin you again in next question routine. If everyone's okay with us, moving on.
Yeah,
Okay.
good. Okay. Now I have to be honest, and I have to say this was the one I didn't like at all when I read the book. The questions or routine for me was like, this is for older students. I'm a secondary teacher. I'm not a primary or an infants teacher, but I ended up in primary, okay? Changes of life. So I had to adapt to the little ones. And when I saw this, I was like, okay, no, this is for high school. They are not gonna be able to do it. I'm gonna skip this chapter. And then I decided to read it because it's Trevor, and I had to read. So what did I get that surprised me? It surprised me that it gives students a frame to organize themselves. It doesn't have to be an organization of difficult questions. Any question is valid, we said. So it can be for my students. And apart from that, you have something that says that a good provocation is vital. That if we add the question continuum to the question sort routine, we can have a good provocation. It will be like a follow-up. We have the question continuum, and then the question sort is where we classify. We can have small groups or a whole class group, and they will classify the different questions. They will sort the questions out. So for me, that was kind of okay. I said, perfect. And also another thing I did, well, I had done, and I didn't know it was part of the question sort routine, is that you give the students a word bank before starting the question sort. You give them a backup. You give them what they don't have, what they need to start asking questions. And I did that last year with one of my units of inquiry. I gave my students a word bank on fairy tales because they had to make questions and they didn't have the vocabulary. So I gave them that like a thinking bubble full of expressions from fairy tales vocabulary, so they could start making questions. And that's something that it's vital for question sort. So when I was reading it, I was like, okay, maybe, I was mistaken, my mistake. Then once students complete the continuum and start the question sort, it's very important to give them time for reflection, which is something we always say. We don't get good questions if we don't give time for stop and think. I call it stop and think. We stop and we put our thinking hat. It's not chitty-chatting. We are going to think because, 6-year-olds will be talking forever. So stop, think and reflect. And that's something that we have to do when we do this routine, because if not, it can become overwhelming or stressful, at least for me. What else? I think these were my intakes from this one, because it's quite short. Yeah, for me, the thing that really, got my attention was that it was like the follow-up of the question continuum, that it gave students the frame to organize that question continuum, that time for reflection was vital, not to end up in chaos, and that it was better to give them a word bank, a vocabulary, or a background first. If you don't want to give them words because they are older, a background. And that a good provocation was vital to get the questions we wanted. But that's something we already know. And we also know that it's difficult to get a good provocation, so we might need many. And that's it.
Amazing. I was just about writing in the chat, I'll just say it. So this is the first routine. It's a lot like I was telling you, Priscilla, earlier. I was like, I know I got that from somewhere. Where Trevor brings in like high interest and low interest on the grid. Do you guys notice that, like I'm on
Yeah.
page 202?
Yeah.
He's got open-ended, closed-ended, and then the pictures have high interest, low interest, right? So maybe that's some of your hesitation with the younger kids, although they
Mm.
totally get that, right? It's just another kind of element of like, all questions don't give us the same level of interest, right? And so it's interesting to see them sorted on that grid, high interest and low interest. Has anyone tried this one yet?
I haven't tried.
Oh, I've never tried this either.
No, I haven't tried because I was really confident with the outcome of the question triangle.
Yeah,
And I was also really confident with using the question continuum with the provocations, with the visible thinking routine. So I haven't used this one. I have to be honest. Hey, hello. My son is here.
Priscilla, this could be interesting to do with teachers.
I think so. I think
Because
that one is good for Priscilla.
if you're trying to get out of teachers what they want to learn about, you could use this routine to find out what they're interested in learning next with you. I don't know, as an instructional coach, I was always planning professional development and things like that. And it's a game. You're trying to figure out what they want to learn, right? Because when we know educators engage, they're more likely to learn with you. So it might be an interesting one to try out with educators and see what they're interested in moving forward with or not, or things like that. I don't know, it just came to mind.
That's true, because sometimes we think that we know what they need, but then surprise, there are other things, for example, with the question pencil routine I tried with the teachers, they were so many questions came up about differentiation. And I was not even thinking about that. I'm like, okay, you are talking about inquiry with kids that have specific needs. So, okay, I'm like, interesting. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm gonna try this.
Yeah, that could be a really good next step of, we're gonna ask questions about differentiation and we're gonna put them on this grid. And
I
you're
was-
really gonna get, the hardest part is not knowing what your teachers want to learn about. Like kids, young kids especially, they tell us, you know? But with teachers, it's hard to know, but like you're already getting somewhere big time with differentiation with inquiry. Okay, what's the next level? What are you interested in? Small groups, learning support, what are all the different ways we can do this? And then you're gonna really know how to target your PD, and they're gonna be like, oh, she wants to know what I want to know and where I am. Andrea, were you gonna say something?
I was going to say that the question pencil itself, the way it's designed, it's differentiated in a way, because I was discussing with my students today that they were talking, I was eavesdropping on their conversation, and they were talking about this child being smart or not smart and everything. And I said, we are all smart. Some of us just approach learning a different way. Sometimes everything comes really slowly to some of us. We have to think a long time. Others like this. So the question pencil is a great way, and I have found it's a great way to show differentiation, my students, how they are differentiated, because I will have, I have a child who speaks 5% English. That's about it. But she can always write a why question. She can write a very basic why question, and she will write her why question which will give me an idea of what she is interested in, right? And as the questions go, and I have this child, there's another child in the class, she would write a could and a might. And she's the only one who writes a could and a might question because of the way she thinks. So the pencil itself, and for Priscilla, you can have your teachers know that the pencil itself is a way of, or any of the continuums actually, is a way of differentiation, because you want all the students to be a part of